So should we talk looking in there or just at each other? Okay, we'll do both. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So our intention for this video is to just spread awareness for the mental health struggle that I think a lot of people are going through, especially teenagers. And my heart goes out to them and to parents because we've been through it in our own story, and we just want to reflect and hope that this helps with someone else's journey. So Avery, how long would you say, and what age did you start suffering pretty severe depression?
Oh, what age?
Yeah.
10, 11, 12?
10, 11, 12. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say most of Avery's life has been touched by that. And what would you say, do you know of any triggers, or it just happened?
Like, when I started being depressed?
Well, yeah, I guess the point I'm making is, like, not all of us suffer like complete abuse and stuff. Avery and I have a good relationship, and it doesn't say we didn't have hard times, but a lot of people assume that mental health struggles are a result of severe trauma in someone's life, and I disagree with that. Yes, everybody has childhood traumas that they need to go through in order to find themselves or overcome some insecurities or vulnerabilities, whatever like that. But we're talking about like severe mental health depression and suicidal thoughts, ideation and attempts, and self-harm. Those things are not necessarily a result. Like, I never beat Avery, and she had some childhood issues at school, and she did deal with some bullying. There's some stuff there, but not everybody who goes through severe trauma is depressed, and not everybody who's depressed goes through severe childhood neglect and trauma. So know that the source of depression is still, in my mind, unique to each individual, and not necessarily based on any one incident, nor is it prescribable. Like, I've seen a lot of interviews with people who've gone through lots of trauma and just crazy, amazing resilience, and they didn't necessarily suffer depression. So I just think the point is it can kind of come from anything, anywhere, and affect anyone. And so as a parent, when I started to see this in Avery, I, always worried about it, and educated myself on how I could better help her, and tried to keep basically talking to her, although she didn't talk a lot. So it was really hard, and it's hard as a parent to watch your children suffer, and then but especially as they go through being a teenager and all those life changes and the brain development changes and everything, and having depression sets them up for like a higher risk category of falling into self-harm, drugs, alcohol, substance use, these sort of things. So yeah, the scope of it is intense, serious, and has to be addressed. I think the best thing I did was just always try to keep open, honest communication. So
should we go back to the question?
Yes. What's the question?
It was triggers.
Yeah, I mean, did you have triggers, or did you just all of a sudden kind of realize, like, gosh, I feel crappy all the time, or?
Well, I mean, I guess I kind of always felt crappy, but there were triggers that made it, like, worse.
Yeah. So some of those triggers being?
A lot of self-hatred. If I did something that hurt someone else, that killed me a lot.
Yeah. That's true, but and it was to an extreme. Like she came home from school one day and ran up to her room. I think she was in third grade, so that would have been like age 8, something like that. She ran up to the bathroom, locked herself in, and I was like, "Oh, okay, Avery's had a bad day." So I went upstairs, and I could hear her, in the bathroom. She was crying and upset, and I asked her to let me in, and after some convincing, she finally opened the door, and I was like, "Well, what happened?" And it took a long time to get it out of her, but basically all she had done was she was curious about this kid's mechanical pencil, and she had taken it and was so curious about it that she took it all apart and broke it. And the kid was upset, of course, because he wanted his pencil, and the teacher was like, "Avery, we need to not use other people's things that don't belong to you." And so you would think, okay, well, easy fix, no big deal. But she had held that in all day. And then I found her in the bathroom with a pair of scissors, and she was wrenching on the scissors. Thank God they were dull, to try to cut her hand and cut her fingers. And we had this little discussion. I asked her what had happened. I asked her if she, if the teacher talked to her about this, like in front of the class. Was she publicly humiliated? I was just gathering the context of this whole thing, because in my mind I realized like the self-punishment she was giving herself was way out of balance for just breaking someone's pencil. And she knew I could go to the store and buy a new pencil today. It wasn't that big of a deal, but in her mind she had done something unforgivable, and she expressed that to me. And I asked her, well, if I broke your pencil, should I have to cut my fingers off for that? And she said no. And I'm like, well, then why would you? And she was hardly convinced that was still not reasonable. So right away, I could tell that Avery's psyche was geared towards self-hatred, self-harm, and punishment that was way out of balance for the infraction. Do you remember that?
I do remember taking his mechanical pencil apart, but I don't remember anything after that.
Really? Okay.
Not really.
Yeah, that was like one of the first things in my mind where I was like, oh shit, Avery's got an intense psychology up there. Well, to the point where, I already knew she was kind of a deep and complicated child from the time she was way little, but this was the first time where I realized she wasn't afraid to hurt herself, and not just afraid of it, but that she thought that it would fix the feelings that she had inside. So many times people don't understand self-harm, but there's a few things about self-harm that actually help the person process their emotion, especially when that emotion is so big that they don't know how else to do it. Also, being quite a bit numb and not wanting to cry a lot. As she got older, it was easier to hurt herself rather than to cry about something. That was a common thing I noticed with Avery as well. Even when she was a tiny little kid, though, if she got hurt, she would be like, "Don't look at me!" And she would just scream and at us, like super angry, and then go hide because she was ashamed. Obviously I didn't shame her for like tripping and hurting herself. So why was her brain geared towards this? I don't know. And that's really not the point. The point is, if you start to see these things in your children, it's okay to set your mom or parent ego aside and just realize like that's a cry for help. We need to help her understand how to process emotion more so than just ignoring it. I don't think that's the greatest thing to do at all. But anyway, education, and I'm talking too much, so Avery, you go.
I don't know what to say.
Well, so as you got older and into your preteens and teens, the depression got more severe. You had like withdrawn from school. She had one good year at school. Is that 7th grade? Sixth grade, where she was like, oh, she's gonna, she was gonna be herself a little bit, and I think the kids really enjoyed her. But there was something after that shut her down and really after that, you didn't experience very many bonds or friendships with anyone at school. Is that right?
Yeah. I can't even really remember. I think I got ghosted by the people that I was like friends with.
Oh, okay. So they abandoned you in a sense. Yeah. So here's the other thing I'll interject about parenting when you have children, you know, the parent has the perspective of age. But if the child is going through something that's pretty severely traumatic for them, it could be the mechanical pencil, or it could be the friends deciding they don't want to be friends with Avery anymore. And the parent can be like, it's okay, you'll find more friends. But when you, I mean, I don't mean to be negative about it. What I mean is acknowledge how traumatic that is to a child. Like, don't diminish their hurt or pain, because if you can,
because to us it's our whole world. We have a very narrow, like, also kids forget that they're kids.
Yeah, exactly. You have a narrow world, and the parent with perspective can't come in and be like, oh, well, that's nothing. You know, you don't have to pay bills. You don't have, it's not comparing, and it's not, don't diminish those emotions, because Avery's right. That's their narrow world. That's their whole world. If they want to trust you as someone that they can go to with a problem, then you have to acknowledge that the problem, that the mechanical pencil was a big deal, that the friendships ghosting, that's a big deal. And so as a parent, just remember that's their whole world. Don't diminish their pain and suffering. And obviously you want to teach them resilience, but we have to validate feelings first. Otherwise they struggle, because then they think, well, mom doesn't think I should feel this way. And I mean, obviously that's ridiculous. You feel how you feel, and then you process how you feel, and you build resilience by acknowledging how you feel, not by ignoring how you feel. So anyway, just, yeah.
And even acknowledging that, yes, it is kind of dramatic, but that's still how you felt.
Yeah. And at the time you couldn't. Now you're already having hindsight to where you realize, like, wow, that was such a big deal, but now you're thinking, okay, maybe it wasn't. But it doesn't really matter. At the time is what you're helping your child work through these things and build resilience with those experiences. Although Avery wasn't, like, she had a hard time putting her experiences into words. So quite often as a parent, like, I had to kind of dig for information that she wasn't necessarily willing to give me, and would get angry with me and snarky and just really abrupt and even mean at times. At times she was dealing with a lot of pain, and so she would just take it out on me. So as a parent, just remember that your ego needs to just be completely set aside. Like, this has very little to do with you. And if they're, like, lashing out at you, that's how much pain they're in. So always recognize that as the pain that they're in, not anything you did. I mean, and if you did do something, just be humble about it. Yeah, I fucked up, whatever, No one's perfect. We're learning together. And that was the thing with Avery and I. We were learning together. So over the years, this depression was pretty bad, and we did seek medical help and counseling, but I would say that the counseling did minimal help. That's not to say it wouldn't help other people better, but Avery wouldn't trust people to talk to.
I don't trust people with being vulnerable.
Yeah. So she kind of sat in the session, and I don't think she said much. The counselor would ask questions, but you would just give, like, one-word answers, or I don't know was, like, something you answered for nearly everything. And AKA, I don't know means I do know, but I'm not going to talk to you about that. When a child answers you, I don't know, they do know. But it means they're either not ready to talk about it, or they don't want to, or they don't trust you enough to. So when that phrase, I don't know, that there's a lot to it. Of course they know, and there's issues.
Sometimes I think you don't actually know. I mean, subconsciously, probably.
Yeah.
But it's not. It hasn't really been.
But sometimes you don't know.
Sometimes you're. I mean, obviously, you could probably find it, but it would take a while.
Yeah. Or find the
a lot
words.
Of work.
Find the words to express it. Yeah. So.
But it is true. It is kind of like, I don't want to tell you, or I'm not ready to tell you, or admit that to myself even.
Yeah. So, tell us about depression in your mind.
Like just how.
Yeah, kind of your experience with it and how. I don't know. Depression for me is kind of like this thing that tries to destroy your thoughts and feelings of goodness, and it quite often takes over completely, and it's like drowning and you're barely getting a breath in between bouts of severe depressed feelings.
Yeah, I mean, depression is fighting yourself. You are fighting an uphill battle against your own self. It's also a liar. It's probably one of the worst things about depression is that it lies to you about everything. All your relationship with people. And that's why most people kind of distance themselves from everyone else, because it's some sort of, they're lying. It's just lies. That, I don't know. Like for me anyways, I thought I was a monster. I thought I was absolutely awful. So I thought, how could anyone else possibly love me when I couldn't even love myself? So I don't know, I was really mean because of that. Because I was like, how are these people...
Mean to yourself and mean to others?
Yeah.
Pushing others away. Yeah. And when did the idea that you could take your own life occur to you?
I don't know, forever.
Like, did you hear about it because people in our community... We did have in our community several suicides, and we were totally aware, and some of them were very young. I think the youngest was like 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. Did that...
Maybe that. I mean, I don't know.
Don't remember exactly
really,
when you realized you could take your own life.
I think death is always there, though. Even if you don't realize it's something that you could do.
You could do.
I don't know. Maybe I was more perceptive than most kids. I don't know.
Maybe. Well, I think that is a point to make, that actually depression...
Well, also Grandma died when I was in 3rd grade.
Yeah. Yeah, so you knew, you knew of death and grieving. Well, and I think one of the things when I realized, like, you wanted to punish yourself, and like you were such a young age, and I thought, she's taking the scissors, thinks, cutting her fingers off would be the punishment for breaking someone's pencil. I went to work on some education so that I could be more helpful. Instead of, like, as a parent, I went through a lot of despair, grieving for the challenges that my daughter faced, knowing that depression was such a hard battle, because it was nothing I could do for her. I couldn't make her believe that she was lovable. I couldn't make her get in a good mood. I'm famous for trying to, like, push a good mood onto someone. Trying to, like, come on, let's have fun, let's go do this, let's go do that, and Avery was always just like, shut me down, like, nope, get away from me, leave me alone, that sort of thing. And if you believe what she's telling you, like, get away from me, leave me alone, I don't want you to talk to me, shut up, all these kind of things, a parent could just walk away from that and never address it again.
You'll lose your child that way.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is, yeah. So for the people who are outside of the person who is depressed, you just can't leave. Because it's going to have to be them that's going to fight or decide to, I don't know, rejoin society, whatever you want to say. But you can't leave them.
Yeah.
Because then that'll prove that everything that they're thinking to themselves.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, look at them, they're leaving me. I was right. I was right.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not worth it.
That is such a good point.
But also for the person who is depressed, you just, I mean, it is hard to talk, but try and listen to them. Because they are looking at it more objectively than you are. It's the same kind of kid, narrow-minded view of the world.
Yeah.
Of yourself. They'll always see you more than you'll ever see yourself.
So you're saying like the people that are there for you that stay, try to listen to them because they are there to help. So even though I was irritating you with my, oh, let's go do this, let's go do that, let's help you, where that really annoyed her in her state of depression, it was still necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
because
think
at some point it does kind of get into your brain. You hear it over and
Yeah.
over and over again at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think parents forget to realize that repetition really has to be there. Like, just for example, one time I had a conversation with one of my daughters about sex when she was young. And then later, as she got older, preteen area, she really hadn't been able to receive and process the information that I had given to her about sex at that time. And I thought in my parent mind, we had already had that birds and bees discussion. So of course she remembered and had her knowledge that would help her. But actually it had been embarrassing to her and she had kind of like shoved it away, ignored it. And so then when she got into the situation where she should have remembered those things about sexuality and children and everything, she felt I hadn't talked to her about it and I didn't realize. And so then she went to friends and the internet for information where that was a mistake as a parent to think that talking about it with her once would carry her through her entire high school career. Which, thinking about it now, I'm like, duh.
Especially at like 12.
Well, yeah, and she was
12's
probably
kind of
younger. I was like 9, 10, talk to her about that.
You should still tell them at that age, but
yeah,
it'll need a repeat once they
need lots of repeat.
Once they reach like
It's
middle
true,
school,
true.
high school, because there's everyone else.
So yeah, parents, if you think you've already told your child something, it doesn't matter. The brain needs repetition, just like when they're learning at school, they need the learning at home. Repetition. You have these conversations, and even your child would be like, well, I already know, you've already said that, and all this, and they will protest the repetition, but it doesn't matter. Just keep doing it. I think that is really important, actually. And I think honest discussions, and it doesn't matter when those discussions take place. If you have an opportunity, that's one thing I wanted to say. If you have an opportunity where your child is ready to hear something, stop what you're doing and have the conversation. Don't be like, we'll talk about it later. No. If the child seems open and interested, that is the time for the conversation.
You'll lose that too.
You totally.
Because then they'll be like, oh, I shouldn't just have said anything anyways.
Right. They'll get embarrassed. retreat, because then they're embarrassed that you kind of rejected their openness to have a conversation. So I will give an example to this. We had a child in our community who was 12 years old, committed suicide. I was afraid for my kids to know too much about it. Also, just keep in mind that the fact that I just said I was afraid. So anytime you feel afraid is the time that you have to face it.
Yeah, fear will totally destroy it.
Fear will destroy it. Please don't let fear stand in the way. It does not give your children any more ideas because their imagination is wild. So having an open, honest conversation about something you're afraid of is the only way through it. And you learn so much if you just don't let that fear stop the conversation. So back to the experience. So a 12-year-old in our community committed suicide. I was afraid of the topic because I knew Avery was struggling with severe depression, and I knew that she had already self-harmed and had suicidal ideation. I already knew that, suspected it, was aware of it, And so when this thing in the community happened, I thought, oh, will that spark an interest in her? And maybe it will, maybe it won't. It doesn't matter. You can't be afraid of the topic. And this is what I learned. So we got in the car to go to school, and there were all these ribbons tied around the trees. And the children, my children, as I was taking them to school, and they were asking about the ribbons, and I immediately wanted to be like, oh, it's just the community celebrating something. But I knew very well that the children at school would be discussing it, and it wouldn't be right of me to allow my kids to go to school and for them to say, oh yeah, my mom said that was a parade or something. Because they would be caught with the truth, and then they'd be like, oh, mom snowed us or lied to us. So I was like, okay, guys, a child in our community died. And then, of course, they asked why, how, how could a child at 12 years old die? And I was faced with something I was really afraid to tell the kids. But either I tell them and we have a discussion, or they go to school and they just hear all of the gossip, rumors, and whatever the kids have to say about it. So I just sucked it up and was like, okay. And we were on our way to school. And of course, I knew that would create a time issue with being to work on time, being to school on time. But like I said, if the children are asking questions, that is the time for the discussion. And I just trusted that. At the time, I was just trying to trust my inner self as to how best to help my children. I didn't know that was the right choice. I was just trying to listen to my soul to help my children, open and honestly, and without the fear. So fearful as I was to have the conversation, we did it anyway. And yes, they were late to school. I was late to work. We had a discussion in the vehicle about suicide. And children are curious. They want to know how the child did it, and they want to know. And the thing is, like, we can argue all you want, but when Criminal Minds is a highly rated show, and all these documentaries on serial killers, come on, human nature is kind of morbidly curious, and children are no different than the adults. They want to know, and by not telling them, you will just drive them to find it either with their friends or online. So if you want to be the one to discuss it with them, then you have to. So I talked about how this child committed suicide and what that might look like. They want to slow it down in real time. So, did he got a gun, he was in so-and-so's backyard, and he was found by so-and-so, and that is not something, that is pretty. It's gory. I told the children gory details, that if you take a gun to your head, this is the mess that has to be cleaned up. You're dead, but the people that love you are the ones cleaning up your brains. Okay, that people are going to be outrageous for me to say that. But the truth is, putting it down to where their curiosity gets questions answered helps them to see past killing themselves.
No, it was a very eye-opening conversation. Especially because you talked about how the parents would feel and the family. Like that, yeah, you're dead, you're gone, but you left your entire family. I mean, that's extremely hard. And I love my family, so I might have wanted to kill myself, but I wasn't going to hurt them the way that you described them as getting hurt.
Yeah, how much
even
pain.
if it hurt me.
Yeah. And I have at times told Avery, when she was in some pretty depressed states, even when she wouldn't talk back with me, I told her, like, can you just stay here today for me? Will you just live today for me? Even if it's not for yourself, will you just do that for me today? Because I love you and I need you. So, really, it's the nitty-gritty truth. It's not what's the best thing to say, what's the strategy. Like, fill the conversation out, try to help your child understand the world around them by being at their level and understanding. Let them say what they need to say about it. Let them ask the questions without feeling like, oh, if I ask how he killed himself, is that weird? Am I bad? So a lot of parents maybe would be like, that's a shameful thing to ask, or that's so morbid, or that's so gross. You cannot judge the child for being curious. That's how they learn, that's how they live, that's how they process. So please try to just get rid of ego and social norms. Everything is out the window, because the minute you speak plainly and you answer their questions that they want to hear, then you can have a conversation again and again, because they know you're going to be honest, you're going to tell them the truth, and you're going to do your best. And that's about all you can do with that. And that wasn't the first time that a child in our community took their own life. Subsequently, throughout the next 2 years, there was at least 4 other suicides in our neighborhood and community. And
there was a lot of different colored ribbons.
Yeah. It was a terrible time. And we went through every single one of them with open, honest conversations about life and about death and about leaving people behind if you go, and how, like, the person that has to clean up that mess, honestly, if that's what helps keep your kid from taking their own life violently, then fine, whatever. Yeah. I think that's an okay conversation to have. What else? As we went through, we did seek professional help. We did go to the doctor. We did have medication. And over the years, the medication, that's a whole other conversation. But medication is not the only answer. It can help. It does help. But I personally think it doesn't have to be a lifetime use. But those medications are so extremely hard to get off of. The side effects are just so severe for some people. Like me, I've been weaning myself off antidepressants for a long time, and if I stop taking them, then I'm just pretty violently ill, dizzy, sick, nauseous, and then a little. So anyway, tread lightly on the SSRIs or the antidepressants, but at the same time, don't deny your child relief, because when you are trapped in your own head, you need help. And so get the help where you can find it and try it, use it, but be caution. Some medications don't help and they can make it worse. So as a parent, you have to be completely aware, completely honest, totally checking in. Because like Avery didn't come to me and tell me she had this medication, it was acting weird. I knew she was acting weird, and I'm like, do we give it the 4 to 6 weeks, or how is this going? And so I would have to come to her because she wasn't telling me, she wasn't giving me feedback necessarily, because she's withdrawn and in. So I'm over here trying to dig information. How are you feeling today? And that irritated her all the time. Like I can even ask Avery, like, hey, how you doing? So get over yourself as a parent. You still need the information. You still have, even that answer, is an answer. And you have to take that and be like, this isn't helping. I think, and possibly maybe this is making it worse. So she had a medication, I think it was like a year and a half ago. And it was 2. It totally was terrible. It was. And that was, after she had seen a psychiatrist for diagnosis.
That medicine was hideous.
The medication was just completely terrible, and so we had to take her right off of that. And the problem with finding the help you need, honestly, in America, we have a terrible, we have a system that fails us. It's terrible. You call a counselor, they're 3 weeks out. She's suicidal. What the hell? You take her up to uni for immediate care. Not quite suicidal enough, and then, make an appointment with the psychiatrist. Okay, 6 weeks later, because psychiatry is harder to get into than a counselor. And not only that, I mean, at the time we were blessed to have health insurance coverage, but back when she was 12, 13, we had no health insurance that would cover counseling or help of any kind. And so, I mean, it really is so unethical that insurance and cost money, people. I mean, this is insane that money can determine whether or not a person has to suffer. I mean, it's just insane. I, I'm at a loss of how upsetting it is to me, to think that so many people are struggling out there, and you call to make an appointment, you have to deal with, different people, and then it's 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out, 6 weeks out. And then when you get to the 6 weeks, and I'm like, okay, we've made it 6 weeks, the psychiatrist is really going to give us good information and help us. And no, I found out, they're asking questions to make a diagnosis, to make a prescription, to make a medication call. And that's it. That's all the psychiatrist was good for. And I'm like, well, fuck, my family doctor already prescribed medication that was like beneficial enough. I mean, so what are we here for? You were going to help us, and we don't have help. This isn't help. And I would say the only thing that I ever called that I thought was somewhat helpful is we called a hotline. Avery was face down on the floor, completely non-responsive, not going to talk to anyone. And I called the hotline, and it is a unit from the hospital, and they come to your house and they talk to the child, and they got her off. They were able to talk to her enough to get off the floor and have a little bit of intervention, but they weren't people that she could bond with, because they were just the crisis intervention team. So then they when she was stable, they left, and that was great, but there was no follow-up. The follow-up is me and family and this. So you feel, when you're fighting this battle, you feel so alone, especially as a parent, because, I mean, not only is counseling astronomically expensive, but you might have to go to how many different counselors to find the one that fits your child or gets your child. And maybe you're the only one who gets your child. I mean, and then the child feels overwhelmed, because how can they explain their whole life in a nutshell, and they get really overwhelmed about this. Plus, if they're not trusting and all that, I mean,
well, also if there is that kind of guilt where you're like, well, I wasn't abused as a child, I shouldn't be feeling any of this. I wasn't like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you didn't go through genocide or terrible world wars, or so. Then there she is again with that whole I don't deserve to feel depressed because whatever, I haven't been through trauma. Lots of judgments we put on ourselves. I've been guilty of the same, because honestly, I can say like I have a blessed life, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be depressed, and depressed doesn't mean that you're not grateful.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I don't know, the takeaways. We need to wrap this up probably, but Avery, is there some things you want to share about the takeaway? I mean, you're 18 years old. You're graduating high school. There were times where we offered options of like just getting out of high school, not even being in that environment, trying something new, trying something different. I would say that as a parent, that's something that you need to get rid of, the structure of development in life. Not everybody needs to go to a public high school or a private high school or Job Corps or any of these things. You can help your child by allowing them to understand that you are willing to be flexible about the choices that you make together for the health, mental, physical, being the greater good. And so when you prioritize health, then you teach your child that nothing else matters, because no learning can happen in this state. No friendships can be made in this state. Right? I mean, you have to get on top of that health before these other things can really be super beneficial. That doesn't mean she's not depressed. It means she's not in the darkness of suicidal thoughts. So yeah, she still has endured lots of depression on and off. Depression is like this roller coaster. It's up and down, this sort of thing, and it ebbs and flows and yada yada, and there's triggers, and understanding yourself is key to helping you move through those things. But in the end, here she's 18. We've done a few things that. What would you say was the most helpful thing along the way?
I don't know. I guess just talking to you.
You being there.
Yeah, being there. It's as simple as that. Like, treat your child like you would treat your best friend. You know, like, give them respect, give them validation. Really try hard to understand, even if it's something you don't understand. Don't let anything be taken so personal that you're upset with your child and shut them down or out. You know, Avery over the years said a lot of hurtful things, and they were seemingly aimed at me, but I could see through them, you know, and that doesn't mean I didn't go in the other room and cry sometimes because I'm human too. But at the same time, it was a reflection of her inner pain. If you keep that in mind, you can really save your own person like a lot of heartache. So that the book, the 4 agreements that you make with yourself, one is don't take anything personal, and it's just absolutely true, but it requires cognitive practice. So that does not come naturally. That takes cognitive effort and practice. And all the strategies that we use the truth is this is a chronic disease. It's not something that goes away magically and you are never depressed again. So you do what works at the time, and then sometimes that morphs and changes all the time. It just, not sometimes, it does. So maybe some people find running, which I think is just terrible. People think running is really helpful and everything. Great if it is. If that's not going to work for you, there is no prescribed this, and this for depression. But I will say this, which I took from Jim Carrey. He said, maybe there's a lot of things in life that can't be changed in pertaining to mental health and depression. But if you don't at least get some sunshine, move your body, and feed your mind something positive, you're not even giving yourself a fighting chance. And I think that's true. But that's a level of depression that's here. I can give myself a fighting chance because I'm willing to go sit outside and feel the sun on my face. But when you're not even there, you got to have a hand. You got to have someone to literally pick you up and say, okay, we are going to stand up. We are going to go outside. And I took Avery out one day. There was a little bit of sun hitting the house, and I made her go stand out there with me. She didn't want to, But sure enough, 20 minutes after sitting in the sun, she started talking pleasantly. Her mood was uplifted. It literally was miraculous. So I can definitely attest to that. But, when you're in a place where you can't even drag your ass out of the bed to shower, then you're not in a place where you're giving yourself a fighting chance. You have to have a hand. So, anyway, what do you think?
Yeah.
Anything else? There's a lot to it. I could go into the whole, getting help from the medical field. Sometimes it's just such a shit show that it contributes to your depressed state, because then it really feels like there's no hope. Well, if they can't help me, what am I going to do? As a parent, I felt that a lot, They give me medicine, but that doesn't make things go away. A counselor once a month or even once a week is not going to make our daily routine change. We have to work together. So I think as a parent, yes, it can be very overwhelming, but, educate yourself, connect with those who are going through the same thing as you so that you can help each other. I think during a lot of that time, I really didn't talk to a lot of other people. Maybe that would have helped me more. I did read a lot of books though, and I did work on ego and just getting that out of the way so that I could really understand Avery, because it wasn't about me, it was about her. And I think as a parent, you immediately kind of say, well, what did I do? How did I fail her? And for the longest time, there was an incident of trauma. It was probably more traumatic for me than it was for Avery, but it was a moment of trauma and a moment of failure as a parent. And I did not forgive myself for that for a long time, that I had hurt Avery, and I won't describe the whole situation, but as a parent, you do stupid shit sometimes, and there's no excuse for it. I just made a mistake, and I didn't physically hurt her or anything like that, but it was just one of those things where I, as a parent, was like, oh, I fucking failed so hardcore that I hated myself for it. And so as Avery was growing up and suffering this, I took the blame. I was like, this is all my fault. For so many years, it was all my fault. And it took me more and more reading, more and more self-reflection, investigation, pushing through the trauma, which I couldn't even talk about it for a couple of years, but pushing through the trauma of that event for me helped me to realize that I was acting like this was all about me. And the truth was, it wasn't. There are some triggering connections. Childhood traumas are a real thing. But we were working through those. But my inner hatred for what I had done and my lack of forgiveness affected how well I was able to parent and work through that with her. So I had to do work within myself to not make it about me and to release that, and so that I could more fully help Avery. So yeah, get out of your own way, parent. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think? Last words? That's about everything I had on my list for today. I mean, I can talk forever, but anyway, for those of you out there, it's been way too long. I don't know. I'm not very good at making videos, so this is going to be a nightmare to produce.
Sure.
Anyway, Avery.
I don't know. Again, it is a lot of forgiveness, I would say. Also that your kid will always think that they're more mature or older than they actually are. And that's kind of like, I read some journals from a couple years ago, and I was like, I never thought of myself as like a child. And I've always been super hard on myself. But going back and reading those, I was like, yes, this is a child. This very much is a child's brain. And that was kind of weird. But you just would never actually say the things like that to a different child. So why don't you say it to yourself?
Yeah. And how are you feeling? You're getting ready to graduate high school, and there's going to be leaps and bounds of different life experience, but going forward, how do you feel?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm
Good.
definitely ready to graduate.
She's over that. So yes. All right. Well, thanks for having this discussion with me, Abe.
Yeah.
Awesome.